right. Well, thanks for joining us at ATF. We're super excited to have Evan and Austin from Griffin Armament. Thanks for joining us, guys. We appreciate you guys making the time.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah. So we're excited to talk to you guys. You're in one of our favorite categories, firearms, and then especially within firearms, you guys do some really impressive manufacturing that I know. You fought hard to bring your product to the marketplace, kind of pursue, that dream that you guys had coming out of the service. And we're excited to kind of hear the background of that story and what led to where you guys are, today as a company and some of the exciting things you're doing going forward.
Sure. I'd like to start off with what I think was the beginning of Griffin Armament.
Yeah.
And that was when my brother and I would go by the magazine rack at the local grocery store and look at the shotgun news. For the older guys that remember that publication, it was like a newspaper, basically. It was it started before there was a lot of really cool color magazines. But we used to dive into that, when my mom was shopping for groceries, and we'd look at all the surplus parts kits for guns and the World War II stuff that was still floating around in quite a large circulation at that time. Fast forward from there, we used pellet rifles, BB guns, just like, many other Americans, growing up with that heritage and tradition of firearms in general.
Right.
And I think we really got into silencers kind of when we started hanging out with some former Vietnam veterans that were long range reconnaissance patrol guys, people that had done 2-3 tours over in Vietnam that had more interesting toys than what you find at your uncle's hunting cabin.
Right.
And that kind of piqued our interest for it. And you want to take it from there?
We definitely did a lot of reading, and that was back before, librarians had removed a lot of historical context from libraries, but we could still get books like the Peter Sinek sniper books, which are, very informative about the sniper program, World War I to, present time. And in those books, they, one of the sniper tools is a silencer. And so they show you and talk about different programs to select silencers, different products that were fielded. And you'd see, exploded diagrams of parts. And they have a pretty good history of the Vietnam selection processes for the silencers that were fielded in the Vietnam era in those books. And those kind of became a foundation for an interest in silencers. And of course, there were other influences there. Al Paulson wrote a lot of articles in the mid to late 90s and was testing silencers. So you could follow the advancements of technology through the magazine articles.
Yeah. Yeah. And then from the reading, going to the public library a lot, checking out umpteen books on the war and stuff like that, and small arms technology. Fast forward a few years, and we ended up both joining the Army National Guard in our home state.
Yeah.
As infantry guys, got exposed to suppressors a little bit with that.
Yeah.
Then after a few deployments, we both transitioned to the State Department Worldwide Protective Services program, where we were exposed again to suppressors. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of something that we never, we were always kind of around it.
Yeah.
So it made a lot of sense. And, 2010, 2011, that time frame, that program was getting pretty risky for a number of reasons. And we were kind of both looking for an exit strategy. We didn't want to do it for 10 years. And we'd been saving our money, from that experience to put it into something. We actually tried to start a training group, which was a failure of business, but it taught us a lot of things. And then Griffin was already running at that time because Austin had started in 2005.
Yeah, the training group was more of a public outreach effort to just decrease the hostility in the silencer industry, because the forum posting and the exchanges between company owners were pretty ugly, and we wanted to kind of let the industry know we're giving something back. And we started with a friend of ours from the military, a training group that we invested a great deal of money in, like something like $100,000
And time.
and time. And we were doing the courses, and we never took a paycheck. We got people paid for courses that went into a general fund, and I don't even know what happened to the bank account. I think I have a card in my wallet, but I never used it. But I was intending to. We thought it'd be great to stay a little current in the use of firearms.
Yeah.
Also teach other people to use firearms and interact with people on a level that they could actually get to know you, as opposed to like the internet where you really can't.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
Yeah, but after that business failure, we really locked down on Griffin Armament, really focusing heavily on it.
Yeah.
And it pretty quickly turned the corner after we left our State Department contract jobs. We weren't not working directly for them. We were working for the subsidiary companies.
Yeah.
They were providing services to them. But on or around that 2012 area is when we really decided to get out of that area of operations and get home. We wanted to start families as well. So we both started families right away. I've got 2 daughters. He has 2 sons. They're around the same age now. They're about 8, 9 years old. And so that was about 10 years ago. And we've been nationally marketing the Griffin product line since 2012. And we've had nice growth year over year. The market has seemed to accept it pretty well. The customers like the product and the brand and the customer service. So it's been really nice.
So it's interesting. So, I mean, before we jump ahead, from there, like going back, were you guys raised in a military family?
Not necessarily. Both of our grandparents were in World War II.
Yeah.
One was on a Navy PT boat as a cook, and one was what I would consider a war hero. He was a medic in the Philippines in the Army, and at one point, I think, was written up for a Silver Star for...
He was written up for a Medal of Honor, but he declined it.
Yeah, but he received a Silver Star for rescuing, I think, like something like 20 or 30 guys.
It was 55 people he pulled into the Moanta Tunnel during a artillery barrage that lasted 48 hours.
Yeah, and so he was a Michigan State Spartan ball player, equestrian veterinarian. Got into being a medic because he had veterinarian experience,
right?
Which is not obviously super related to human beings, but it's a close second. For the battlefield. Close enough for World War II. And
for the prison camp, yeah,
right. And he was taken prisoner.
He operated in the prison camps on people that needed surgeries using a veterinary book that he had.
Oh my gosh.
And so he was in the prison camps for about 3.5 years.
He got a Bronze Star for conduct in a camp.
So he was the closest thing. I mean, we weren't super close to him. He was a pretty closed off guy. I think his time in the prison camp rendered him socially distant, because he saw genuine hardship that a lot of people have not seen in recent conflict.
He was tortured.
Yeah. So
he had cigarette butt scars and somebody gouged a piece of his leg off with a buttstock of a rifle.
Right.
He had a pretty interesting.
I'd say
stories.
that fits hero category. Absolutely.
Yeah. So he was the closest thing we had, but we were just always kind of interested in guns and military history.
But as kids growing up reading the historical books, we would run into older people at times and ask them what they did in World War II, and you get a lot of interesting stories because that whole generation was essentially involved, and sometimes you get colorful stuff that you didn't quite want to hear. It's funny, I was in a Disney pool one time and I heard a really racist story of a guy who actually was Australian in the Australian military, and he was talking about making fun of a black B-38 pilot who was calling Mayday in the air, and he was quite colorful with his epithets, and it was like, wow. I mean, as a kid, you're like sitting there. I'm in a Walt Disney, one of their theme park hotels.
You're overhearing this.
Yeah, right. It's amazing what people will be candid with about their World War II experiences.
Well, those guys were the real deal, though. I mean, there's no censoring those guys.
Right.
That's just that generation, right?
Right.
But then, fast forward to your own childhood. It's interesting. You had mentioned earlier that as kids, I grew up the same as you, right? Like, I mean, my wife, we have, two younger kids as well. So my daughter's 11, my son's 6. And, she's always young. I try to raise them the way I was raised, minus the parental bonuses that I had, but, teach them how to ride a bike, or, you take them out there, you wheel them along. But a lot of parents, dress them up like they're going to be a hockey goalie or something, pads and helmets and braces and everything, because God forbid somebody gets hurt. I was raised the same as you with, BB guns and, mock wars in the front yard with the neighborhood kids. And, we didn't have safety goggles or pads or anything else. You
put on a flak jacket, take out the 22s.
Yeah, 100. Yeah, basically it felt that way, right? And I mean, I still remember, when I got that Daisy repeater,
right.
That was like, that was a huge transitional moment, right?
Yeah.
And, a question that we usually ask when we start this, like, do you guys remember your first firearms experience?
I remember that we found a Red Ryder BB gun. My dad lost his job. He took a position in Minnesota from Illinois, and it was the promise of better pay, and the place was amazingly put together. Great big. It was Aeration Industries, a company with big water tanks where they'd use this aeration equipment to clean up ponds and stuff. And they took us into their headquarters and wowed us with, projector screen movies as kids. And my dad enjoyed the job for a slight time, and the owner died, and his son took over and kind of ruined the company. And in short order, my dad was fired, and we went to Iowa to live with our grandparents. And in the garage, the shed, disattached from the farmhouse, we found a Red Ryder BB gun, and my dad began to tell us stories about his youth, and he had a lot of, I guess you'd say, nefarious exploits with BB guns, because he said his dad, our grandpa, taught him how to use a BB gun by presenting him with a BB gun and saying, "I used to be pretty good with one of these." He picked it up and cocked it and shot a street light out across the street from the house. And nice. I think my grandpa didn't know what he was paying for, because my dad did things like shoot all the windows out of his car. Yeah. But my dad would tell us those stories, and we began to, you have a sense of adventure created, and we hunt around the farm with a Red Ryder, and it's amazing how many shots you have to take to actually, for example, kill like a blackbird with a Red Ryder BB gun as a small kid, because they're pretty harmless BB guns. Yeah, it's true. But yeah, I mean, that was your first experience. Transformational experience is your first pellet gun. Now you've got a rifle barrel and, greater velocity and range and lead ammunition, and
right,
very lethal compared to a BB gun.
Absolutely. Yeah. But it's interesting because you had mentioned earlier that you found this interest or fascination for suppressors, right?
Yeah.
And that strikes me as interesting, right? Because, I grew up same as you, and had a fascination with firearms from an early age, and, that has continued throughout my life. And, I remember as a kid stumbling on, magazines and books and everything else. And, to me, it was always kind of like the normal stuff. It's like you see the machine gun for the first time. You see a bazooka for the first time. You see a tank for the first time. It's like, wow, like the bigger the gun, the better. But for some reason, when you guys saw a suppressor, that was fascinating to you.
I mean, we owned a lot of firearms. We spent a good deal of time with firearms because we were, after moving around several times and being in a school for 6 months or a year, our parents decided to homeschool, and in homeschool you could hunt every day of your life, because you could do your school by noon or 1 o'clock and have an adventure in the yard shooting your pellet gun, and that stuff transitions to deer hunting in Wisconsin. Not too many years ago, when we were kids, deer hunting was like the state sport.
Right.
Where I remember when we were in high school, sophomore year, guys would wear blaze orange to school on the week of deer hunting, like Friday of the opener. And you'd see every other guy is wearing blaze orange because they're all excited about the deer hunting season that's coming up. And so if you're using guns so much and you're in a relatively, in a not completely rural atmosphere, diminishing the sound of firearms is the freedom to use them.
Right.
And so the silencers also, we'd go back to visit our grandparents and with our friends in Iowa, we'd do these rimfire hunts for weekends where we'd blast 500 rounds with a 22, and you start to get some auditory exclusion. End of a weekend, 500 rounds fired on a rifle without ear protection. And you have a desire to, diminish the sound of the rifles. And when you've been reading so many books that talk about the construction, history, and development of silencers, it's kind of a natural segue to begin to screw around with silencers. And that if you have the kind of mindset where you want to improve something, constantly improve, that segues pretty naturally into being in business doing this.
Yeah, I think what causes people to really have a lot of interest in sound suppressors or silencers, whatever you want to call them, is that there's a lot of places in the United States where you can shoot on your own property or even hunt on your own property because it's not opposed to the municipal or county ordinances. But people tend to not do it because they don't want to upset their neighbors and things like that.
Right.
And so what the sound suppressor does is for, responsible gun owners, it gives them an avenue to enjoy their freedom without irritating neighbors and causing, local trouble, essentially. And so I think that's the biggest draw to a lot of people, because land is expensive in America.
Sure.
They're not giving away 40-acre parcels like they used to.
Right.
So
I wish.
That's really, I think, where.
Well, not to mention, I mean, the health side of it, right? Because as most of us, I mean, I don't know a hunter that walks around with ear pro, even though maybe we should. And also in a lot of training, we should probably gear up a little bit more than we do sometimes. And depending on the rifle, it leaves its mark after your fire.
Yeah,
I lost a significant amount of hearing in the Army, and in training, there was kind of an idiot, either lieutenant or maybe like a major on a lane, and he said, "Train as you fight," and for safety on this lane, we're not going to wear earplugs, and it was something that was questioned a couple of times, and then people were like, okay, they want us to not wear earplugs. I camo painted one earplug and put it in my left ear. I had an OC on my right shoulder, and I fired 360 rounds with M16A2 with no adrenaline because it's just a training lane. And at the end of that, I'd lost 90 decibel hearing in my right ear.
Yep.
And I was like, lucky I put the earplug in the one ear that I thought I could get away with, because it's like if you cover this other ear, it's like you're listening through a kazoo. It's like wax paper.
Yeah.
And that is not the way you want to go through your life, because in the Army after that, they had to waiver me to go on deployments. So I had an out for my deployments where I could have just said, I don't pass the pulleys for hearing. I get a 70% on speech recognition, where they're sending the words through both ears independently.
Yep.
And obviously didn't pull the shit bag card, because I didn't join the Army to not serve the country.
Yeah, 100%. Right. Yeah. No, but
I mean, they injured me as a soldier, and they reduced my ability to locate where gunfire was coming from. And it's like, this is a major issue for people like the military, law enforcement. If you compromise the capabilities of your people, they're not going to be as effective.
Yeah. I mean, he's talking obviously about situational awareness but it's like your situational awareness can be very much enhanced with the use of sound suppression, for your small arms.
Well, yeah, and I mean, not to mention, it's I think most civilians probably have not ever fired a weapon without ear pro, but I promise you, in any sort of a self-defense situation, whether it's in your house or if you're CCW out in public, if your first experience with firing a weapon without ear pro is in a situation like that, I mean, certainly adrenaline's going to help you,
Mm-hmm.
but it's going to be shocking.
Mm-hmm.
And the bigger the weapon, I mean, even to this
And the more
day.
times you fire it, I mean, I had buddies in Iraq that, we get, we're taking mortar fire from people we could see. They're in their PTs jumping on 50 cals, going through whole boxes of ammunition, firing at, the enemy. And it's like, you light up a 50 cal, the next day that guy's deaf.
Oh yeah. Yeah. 100%.
I had a guy that lost his hearing to an AT4. He's on his third combat deployment. So he's on his third war with a CIB with 2 stars. And he loses his hearing to firing an AT4.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that. You reach that threshold. It's the end.
Yeah. Agreed. So you guys decided in roughly 2010, 2012.
Yeah, 2010, 11 was when the situation over there was really degrading, and we were really serious
you
about it.
decided to go full time, and we're going to launch this. So you had this American dream of starting your own company, kind of paving your own way, pursuing your own dream.
Yeah.
I started the company in 2005, but it was something you had to operate satellite at great difficulty when you're on deployments, both with the military and with the State Department high threat security mission.
Yeah.
And so I remember times where like I'm on call with QRF after, I'd been transitioned from PSD with Triple Canopy to the emergency response team.
Yep.
And the base is under attack. You're listening to that in one ear and you got a headset on and you're talking people through ATF forms,
right?
Satellite and letting them know that we might get called up in 5 minutes and you're getting your gear ready.
Yeah. 100%. How'd you come up with the name Griffin?
It was kind of like a Main Street USA story. We grew up in Wales, Wisconsin, not too far from here, and it was a Welsh settlement, and they had the Wales Griffin on the flag everywhere in town, and I just thought it was a cool icon. And
I wore a flag of Wales patch. I think part of the military experience that they really drum into people is, it's like even at basic training, it's like spend 47 days at reception battalion, essentially in prison. And you get a lot of time to reconsider whether or not you want to be in the military. That's before you even get to basic training.
Right.
And the thing that keeps you going through basic training and through, wartime deployments and stuff is what will people think of me if I quit? And then on the deployments, they remind you, remember what you represent. You represent the nation. You represent, Wisconsin, you represent your communities, and you're thinking this is heavy stuff because, they're talking about the UCMJ when they're giving those discussions and they're saying, make sure you make the right choices in all your high threat decision making because if you
reflects back
don't acquit well on yourself, it'll follow you the rest of your life,
Right.
And I put a flag of Wales patch on my body armor for my first deployment, and it was this is who I represent. I represent my town.
Yeah. So do you remember the first day of business? I know you kind of soft started before that, but you guys were out.
I left the contracting community a year prior to Austin.
Yeah.
He was still doing engineering work from Biop Airport basically in his free time. And I had my satellite site in Kirkuk had gone to complete shit. It actually got overrun like a year later in 2012 when there was pretty hellacious firefights there. There was mass casualty events. I knew the timing was right to leave. God and my wife was kind of telling me that. And so I punched out about a year prior to him, and I was running it basically solo for the most part in terms of daily operations. And I was excited to go to work because I had a really cool road from my house to the shop, and I like motorcycles. So I got a badass commute in, carving the roads every day on my motorcycle to get there. So I had no complaints to go to work.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, I mean, it seemed like you were batting up a unbelievable hill, but at the same time, it was fun to have control over your destiny because, you know, working in small businesses and some huge organizations that we worked in, it showed you that ultimately your future is up to the people who are above you. And a lot of times they don't really care about you, or they're not making the greatest decisions for the company that are going to eventually help you out.
Yeah.
And so it felt very empowering to be able to make decisions every day that could help you.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That I mean, to me, that is the American dream, right? If you have the risk tolerance to step up and, you know, you have that vision and that dream, you know, we should have the freedom to pursue that. Right. So,
yeah. And I mean, the other thing too is there's no shortage of genuine, nice people in the gun industry. You know, that's another reason why I love working in the gun industry. The first time we went to SHOT Show, which was, I believe, 2012, we were on the wait list for a few years prior to that. And they gave me about a week's notice that we could go. So I threw everything together and drove out there with a friend of mine. And I knew that I needed to make sales there. Otherwise, it was a complete mission failure. But, you know, at least half the people you meet are salt of the earth people in the gun industry.
Yeah.
And so there was probably even people there that year that just felt bad for me and gave me money. You know,
That's all right. I'll take it.
But we never did them harm, and it's been very rare in our 10 years of doing national sales that we've lost a customer. It's almost never happened. I think maybe once or twice possibly, but you know, we do business with the golden rule: treat others how you want to be treated.
Yeah.
You know, and if you conduct yourself that way, it generally works out.
Yeah, when you don't have the economy of scale, it is brutal. It's kind of a no easy day environment where, I mean, I was told to quit by probably 10,000 times by various people in my life. You know, it's like your parents, your family are telling you to quit. I remember getting to the end of production runs, doing the financials, and realizing that I was paying people $10 to take silencers, you know, and it's like the silencers were good performing products that people enjoyed. And, you know, just, geez, I think Friday night I saw a M4SD2, which was a silencer that was $10 more expensive than we manufactured it for, and sold it, you know, and sold it for. And it was back here for a cleaning and refinishing service, you know, fully serviceable silencer from, you know, 2009 timeframe. And it was for me from 2005 to 2013, I was at a deficit where I was losing money every year to run the company, you know, and so like go contracting and they do pay you decently to risk your life every day. I mean, we were paid like $560 a day when I started contracting, and all of that money went into, you know, I lived in a $600 a month apartment. And so there was a $600 a month apartment and my leaves were taken at home.
Yeah.
And that money went into work.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like, it's a great day when you turn that corner, that 2013 timeframe, you know, to what you're doing and what you were dreaming about, actually putting money in your pocket as opposed to taking it out of your pocket.
Well, and doing what you love while still, you know, providing for your family and your future and creating a legacy. And
I was on the track for just an insufferable life because I was going down the government rabbit hole, you know, and I was going to work in the DC area doing basically penetration testing for internet security, which is the most boring job you can
Right.
probably imagine. And the only reason why I was pursuing it is because everyone in my life was telling me that is the pathway to money.
That's the responsible thing to do.
Yeah, from my college days, if I wanted to apply that in a way, that was beneficial. And so I was looking for an out to not, literally hate my life every day, because that would have been just absolutely awful. I'm too extroverted to be in an off every day of my life. So
so when you told your family, we're starting up our own business and we're going to make suppressors.
Uh-huh.
What did everybody say?
I don't think anybody didn't believe that it would work out, because we're relatively dedicated people. So
I know my mom didn't believe that, because she told me probably 3,000 times.
She's pretty
before.
negative, though.
Yeah.
So your first product, so for those that, it's interesting. We were talking before we started that, for the life of me, I have no idea why suppressors continue to hold this mystique and this regulation.
Uh-huh.
And this should be an over-the-counter item.
This should be the muffler for your car, and boring as hell. But it's interesting that the government regulation making it require the $200 tax, the fact that they were showing up only in the hands of wet work people and special mission units in the military.
That's it.
That kind of redefined what the silencer was there to do, and pushed it to this place where people spend a good deal of money on these items. It's kind of like if we only hunted deer with a rifle scope, we would never have, a Schmidt and Bender or a Leupold Mark V,
right?
Developed.
Correct.
But because of the precision sharpshooting community and law enforcement and the professional sniping community in the military, we have these highly developed items that are well in excess of how good they would otherwise be. These items have high military emphasis.
Yeah, no question. But I think what's interesting is, I think to the general public, even the general shooting public, the suppressor is this mystical thing, right? And maybe because, it is an NFA item, and, it's right there on the roster alongside machine guns, which, are equally unobtainable, it seems like. Mm-hmm. And so, and also I think the perception to most people that have never been around a suppressor, is based in Hollywood fiction of, ninjas in the night, sneaking in and having this, being able to slaughter a room at a 0 dB rate and, creep back out in the night. And none of those things, like we were joking around, I can do just as much damage with beating you over the head with my phone as this. And yet this is,
it's a non-firearm that's classified as a firearm.
Right. So tell me about how. So tell me, give our readership and our audience kind of the 101 about suppressors. What do they do? How are they made? And then we can get into what makes yours different.
The silencer essentially gives gas an artificial environment to expand and slow down. It allows the combustion to stop. So it's a cooling and expansion process that reduces pressure. They generally reduce muzzle flash as well after the first round. Some better than others, but generally, why people use silencers is to reduce recoil, to reduce sound to a level that it's not as dangerous to your ears, to reduce muzzle flash. In the military, to reduce vegetation disturbance. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of positive things that happen when you put the silencer on the firearm. How they're made in many different ways. Typically machined or stamped parts are assembled together either using threads or welding. Some of them now are 3D printed.
Cast.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
lot of different manufacturing technologies, but we use the highest grade materials that we can economically afford to put into the product, just because, because of the regulatory process being so, kind of ridiculous. Once you buy one as an individual, it's basically impossible to resell it. Mm-hmm. So it becomes a lifetime investment.
You'd have to pay a $200 tax to get it to a dealer to sell it.
Right. So it becomes basically an investment type purchase for the consumer. They don't want to go through the hoops again of buying it in terms of paperwork and bullshit. They don't want to pay another $200 tax stamp to the government. So customer service in our market is kind of king. If you don't have amazing customer service for the product, then people don't want to buy from you, because they're investing, not only in the product and what it offers, but in the future support of the product. That's been a huge thing, because over the years that we've been in the industry, now knocking on the door of 18 years almost, we've seen quite a few silencer companies come and go in and out of business. Sometimes they only last 2-3 years, sometimes even less. Consumers are kind of getting wise to that over time. And they're saying, well, if I'm going to buy a silencer, I want to buy it from a company who's been around, who I think will be around in the future. Right. So at a lot of trade shows, I brag about the fact that our company is family owned and operated, and it intends to be for a long time. So if you purchase from us, then it's, more likely than not, unless we're dead, we're going to be able to service the product 10 years down the road or more. So that alleviates a lot of the fear that consumers otherwise have in terms of, well, what happens if this thing breaks? What happens if I screw it up?
That goes with the territory where there's a school of hard knocks involved in starting something that you don't know anything about, which is, even if you have researched quite a bit, the thing, you don't know it until you're doing it.
Right.
I read a post yesterday of a guy who was at the range and saw two guys show up with an AR. They fired the first round. The silencer ruptured off the gun. First round failure of a brand new silencer. The guy had just been transferred. And I can believe it, because we have a silencer in our inventory that, long story short, a person purchased but never transferred to themselves. And so it has never left. That during an audit a few years after we had it, we took a look, and the tube was cracked through the engraving because it was a titanium silencer. And so 0 rounds fired, the silencer is destroyed, because the company that laser engraved it didn't understand that when you are heating up titanium with a laser beam, you have to shield it with argon, as it were, a welding process, to keep the atmospheric oxygen from embrittling the material and inducing stress to promote failure. And so
it could have been a dangerous product had it transferred.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it'll break in the box unfired, what would it do if you fired it? It's definitely dangerous.
Not a Griffin can, by the way.
Yeah.
Right. So how did you ultimately, are there different methods of manufacturing? Yes, I know there's different materials, but is there a different construction process? I know,
there's a bunch of different construction processes, and that's
fabric baffles that needed to be replaced.
Right, like World War II, like the Sterling machine gun, the Sten machine gun had, some stuff like that in there. But there's tons of different manufacturing processes. It's basically up to the ingenuity of the engineer and whatever's cost feasible. And we've experimented with almost everything, but we basically selected our process because it's the most economically viable for the consumer as well as us. It's relatively fast. It's high quality.
It's kind of funny, knowing looking back, we can see in like spy books, you can see screen pack silencers like the HDMS taken apart. I think it was Aberdeen made a publication, Silencer Principles and Evaluations, and they actually tested a bunch of silencers in inventory from different events like Mark IIs, Sten suppressors. They had I think they had one of the grease gun, which is like maybe Bell Labs or something,
Right.
made the silencer. And so they had these various silencers apart, and you get to see these things. And one of the first silencers that I made followed a Vietnam War type of style, but lost some of the scope of that. And I put screws into a tube, and that was how the Heel M4 was put together. It had a rear cap with these socket cap screws that held the rear mount onto the tube. And I fired it, but I replaced the socket cap screws with Allen set screws, to be flush. But it's like there's a lesson in everything. In every failure, there's a lesson, and the lesson was look at the amount of metal that was having to take the shear load. The shear load is, when you've got the broached hex key geometry in there, you fire that thing on a rimfire, it works fine. On a centerfire rifle, you shear the tops of the screw heads off, and the guts of the thing blow into the hoods, and that's the end of scratch that one and learn that lesson. And it's kind of like, well, we did have a dark age in silencers. Well,
I'll tell you what, though. I mean, there still is, right? Because we were just recently we were over at Vortex, and we're in their Edge training facility, and at the 100-yard indoor range, and inside the Edge facility. I don't know if you guys have been there, but they've got rows of AR 500 steel across the steeling, to protect the facility, obviously, and there's clearly one panel that just has a massive gouge out of the insulation panel, covering the AR 500, and no other marks anywhere else in the whole facility. It's pristine. I keep looking at it. And, finally I'm like, all right, like, what the hell happened there? Like, seriously, were you firing a 50 cal and somebody just, farted or something? Like, how do you the hell? And they're like, no, a can blew off the end of a rifle and ended up there, and, took a big, so it's, not everybody manufactures great things, right?
Right. So that brings us to more modern technology. This thing is laser welded, and the laser welding is a process that can can fuse 100% of a wall, and it can do it all the way around. And so it's vastly superior to, when we started out, some of the silencers were filler rod plug welded TIG. And that's a method that can put together a very strong product if you have enough of these holes that you fill in with a filler rod. It's very expensive. It's very labor intensive. That got replaced with TIG orbital, welding with CNC welding lathes. And this is the most recent technology, the laser welding lathe, the CNC controlled. And that process is, it's hard to imagine that you can really ask anything more of a welding process than that. Yeah.
So just for education's sake, your suppressors, what is the service life? Like, how many rounds before they need to be broken down and serviced and cleaned?
About a month ago or so, we have a friend in the industry who runs our silencers. He's a law enforcement guy, former Marine Corps dude, and he had 50,000 rounds of kind of rapid fire on a suppressor that we typically make, a 17.4 stainless steel suppressor. He sent it back for a rebuild because the baffles they were starting to get eroded inside, which does happen.
But 50,000 rounds.
Yeah, we sound tested the can because we were curious. We're like, before we service it and recore it, let's sound test it and also pull down from our inventory in the vault
a brand new one.
A unit that exemplifies what a brand new unit was. And so he tested the brand new unit, test his can, and we were 2 decibels apart at 50,000 rounds. His baffle looked seriously eroded, his first one. After that, they were relatively intact. But we could definitely tell why it came back. It came back because there's the appearance of really aggressive erosion, but very impressive to see.
Only 2 dB.
Yeah, 2
over
dB.
50,000 rounds.
Right. Pretty amazing. So
That's remarkable.
I'm assuming you could have ran it almost another 50,000 rounds before it had enough, performance
Well,
loss.
you're
that you'd
replacing
probably notice it.
barrels before you're replacing that. I mean,
Yeah,
50,000
usually
rounds.
for like an AR-15, the accurate service life of the barrel is somewhere around 5,000 to 7,000 rounds.
Right.
We've tried to stay away from coaxial designs for a reason, and some of the other people in the industry use them. They do afford easier sound reduction gains, but that coaxial space, that tube within a tube, creates a low pressure area that's small and that traps a lot of exhaust contaminants like carbon, copper, fouling, and those silencers are known to lose approximately like 7 to 10 decibels at 15,000 rounds by comparison. So there are many different ways to make silencers and many different technologies to construct them, and those design choices, everything involved is a trade-off, and they determine what properties you're going to have.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you started out in rimfire, obviously transitioned to center fire. So now, do you have a full array of silencers by caliber and platform, or?
Yeah, we pretty much service every platform other than a 50 cal. So
That market is pretty niche.
yeah,
so
22.
products are big.
Your rimfire stuff, your pistol stuff, 945. Your AR-15s, your hunting rifles, all the way up to like 300 or 338 lapel Magnum. We do, but
and up to 45-70, the 45 caliber, Magnum cartridges.
right.
Yeah,
So 99% of stuff out there that's popular.
yeah, that's amazing.
And I want to say we have 34 models right now, something like that. So quite a few different silencers too, different mounting systems. Yeah.
Yeah, and people will sometimes look at that and say, "Why so many models?" And it's like, well, there's a bunch of different applications. So there's guys that want to have fun and have a product that's perfectly segued to shooting a carbine. There's other guys who want something segmented to like hunting a Rocky Mountain doll sheep, where they're going to be, trying to keep their gear as light as possible. There's people who want to suppress their entire collection with one suppressor and have the slight compromises that involves. Mm-hmm. And there's, law enforcement customers and military customers who want, more durability or more muzzle flash reduction. And there's gas operated guns and bolt action rifles. And so there's a lot of people, and we want to have products that can be custom tailored more to all those different, types of use. So it's like, a lot of these products can overlap in their use categories, but we want to believe that there's more of a perfect product for each customer, and we'd like to be able to do more of that thing than to push a person into
Here's your
a
two
broader
choices.
category.
Yeah. I like that. So, but you also get involved in other products beyond suppressors.
Yeah, we have full AR-15 custom rifles with all the various components of that. A lot of optics mounts. We took on optics mounts, modular optics mounting systems about 4 or 5 years ago. Those were really intensive from an engineering standpoint. I know that Austin spent the better part of 2-3 years probably getting those to a good stage of development.
Yeah, the optics mounts were more complicated in manufacture than they were in design. Definitely.
Is that because of the precision?
Well, yeah, they're 100% billet machined. They are a unimount, so to speak. So there's not a base component to which rings are clamped, which is an inferior method because you have another, it's like we already have on a lot of rifles, you got a base that you can knock out of alignment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The AR-15 is not one of those rifles because it has the base machined into the receiver.
Correct.
So it's a more durable rifle for field purposes. But then you get to a lot of scope mounts and they clamp a scope mount on the rail. So the scope mount is a point of potential failure or loss of zero. Well, then with a lot of brands, you clamp the rings to the base rail. And it's like we chose the Unimount, which is the cradle, a billet cradle for the scope tube, as opposed to that easier method of create one base rail and then create 3 different
Connection points.
Ring sizes.
Right.
And so we actually have individual CNC programs making individual product mounts.
Right.
And so we have like 35 of those. And we wanted those to be all manufactured, in an aerospace way where we're using the probing in the machines to ensure that each mount is as accurate as the last mount, with regard to like things like, you have lapping in the scope mount industry. If your 2 scope tube bores are not in alignment with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're making a Unimount, we have to swing a rotary and put a bore within 5/10 thousandths of the other bore on the other side of the part. And that's only possible with the probing. But it was not just making the programs, it's also optimizing the programs so that you can have a product that's as affordable and as high quality as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because these mounts, when we first made them, were requiring like 55 minutes or an hour of machine time. And, billable rates on CNC machines are like at the rock bottom for, very refined production shops. They're $85 or $100. And you've got a market product here. It's got to have value added, blasting, anodizing, laser engraving, packaging, distribution,
Marketing.
Yeah. And so you're like, when you set a really high bar, you make a project a lot more challenging than it would otherwise be.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're certainly trying to over deliver a high quality product to the average guy out there looking for great equipment.
Yeah, if you look at the rifles, for example, Daniel Defense would be a very mainstream rifle. Their MSRPs, I want to say, approximate $2,200-ish dollars, and our rifles are somewhere in the $1,900 MSRP range. The Daniel Defense gun doesn't have sights, for example.
No, it comes stripped down.
We sell a rifle with sights, with a suppressor ready muzzle device, with unique furniture, QD swivel mountable latch plate on the rear of the tube. We've got ambi controlled selectors that are
charging
typically an aftermarket accessory people would buy. You get furniture for your rail. Different things are happening with the rifle that are very value added. Like you're not getting an A2 grip, you're getting our A3 grip, which sounds really almost like a joke, but you get a more vertical angle. It's a better ergonomic grip, and I've seen a lot of people post on the internet, for example, and say, I didn't expect to keep the grip, but after I used the gun, I ended up buying the grips for other rifles.
Right.
And you're like, there was an engineering program in there. We took the A1 style greater, width or girth of the grip that gave a better feel than the A2 grip was an inclusive grip. So it was like, we're going to take the smallest female in the military and the largest man, and we're going to try to make something that does everything
for everybody.
And the A3 grip is more like the A1 meets the 1911 vertical angle and gets a better pattern and drops the finger grooves of the A2. And so it's like a lot of these products, there's a lot more to the product than meets the eye. we printed a lot of sample grips, and we critically assess what we do and don't like about a product and make the modifications. And it's like in the infantry handbook, it says an infantryman constantly improves his fighting position. In the same way, the company wants to constantly improve the state of the art on everything that we do.
Yeah. And it, it's obvious that you guys are not just passionate about what you do, but you guys are both lifelong shooters. So, you know what works and what doesn't, what you always wished was out there. And
yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, just because there is, I was kind of shocked when I got into the industry and started going to the national trade shows, how you talk to the guys next to you, your booth neighbors. And there are quite a few gun companies that are owned by people that don't give a crap about guns.
Exactly.
And they're not even gun people. And if you look closely, it kind of shows in their product development.
Well, it's why I bring it up. There's a growing list of companies and investment groups that, just want to capitalize on the market. And, I guess, well, I'm not going to say that's fine. I personally don't think it's fine. Like, I think certain industries, firearms especially, like you should have a background and a passion and know what the hell you're doing, because otherwise, compromised or crappy products or misinformation gets put out in the marketplace.
I fully agree with that. I understand, obviously, the people who make the most money in firearms are the people who bean count the thing down to the cheapest form and sell the most mass-produced version of the thing. So it's kind of a funny industry in that the people who do the best things make relatively the least money doing it, because the pursuit of quality is a segment to much lower volume of sale.
Right.
But I had a particular encounter that was kind of shocking to me. I was at a show, and a former Beretta executive at a very high level had started another company who's making these cheap pistols. And I'm not going to name his brand, but in talking to him at the show, I said, I just don't understand why. I said, when I was a kid, you guys had the Border Marshal pistols that had the skeletonized hammers and the cool base pads and the Brigadier slides and the dovetail installed night sights. And I don't know why Beretta wouldn't take those attributes that really kind of had a little bit of soul and put them into a gun that could also combine other features like the bushing on the stock competition. And he stopped me there because there was a pistol in the late 90s called a stock competition. Mm-hmm. They had a bushing system on the end of the barrel, which brought in the 92 has a floating barrel at the end, and it rattles around, and you either get one that's tight from the fitment of the locking area of the barrel, or you get one that's loose and it shoots crappy. Right. And he laughed and said, that bushing costs? That bushing costs like $6.50. You think we're supposed to put that in all those guns? And it was like, yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
What? There's another option?
God forbid the $6.50. Yeah. Yeah. And it was like, wow, I can see why the soul never, the thing never happened there. It was.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Unfortunately, like a lot of industries, there's outside investment, a lot of these companies, I think they start with the right ambition. They start with the right people. That's why they become attractive investment targets, from outsiders, and some people for one reason or another, see that as, a next step or an attractive option. Yeah. But as soon as that corporate money and, those legal teams and those bean counters and everything get involved, I haven't seen too many situations where they improve a company.
Right. Also when a company's 4 generations old, what is the likelihood that the 4th generation actually gives a crap?
As much as the first. Yeah, right, exactly. Right.
So,
and that seems to be the other trend. But, the nice thing about that, is I always say, everything in life and business is cyclical. And as much as, there may be a bunch of 800-pound gorillas swallowing up a bunch of companies. All that does is screw up those companies and leave openings at the bottom for more entrepreneurial, passionate people to start their businesses, in a marketplace where they can differentiate themselves. And I think, you guys are an amazing example of that, things like, suppressors or especially AR-15s, you just wouldn't think there's any room left in the market for another guy, right?
Yeah, AR-15s especially. I mean, I don't know how many hundreds of brands there are, but there's a lot.
There's a lot. And you guys have carved out, your own piece of the pie, in that for people that appreciate, what it is that you're able to do to subtly differentiate your product from the sea of ARs that are out there.
Yeah, there's a thanklessness to the pursuit of quality and greatness, but in brief moments, you'll get the reward of somebody recognizing something. And we were at a marine event with some procurement people, not too long ago, and we were showing them sound suppressors. And one of the guys picked up a rifle very much configured like this one on the table. And he said, "So can we get the rifles?" And this is a guy who is in an organization that's issuing, the HK416. And to me, that's the reward of really trying to have a great achievement is getting just that little comment that somebody esteems you competitive with a brand like HK. To me, that means a lot to me.
Well, I think it's why we love these industries that we serve so much, because I think generally speaking, it's a great population of great Americans, that operate within it, that, the consumers as well. I think, when you find a gun guy, more than likely, that's going to be a guy that, you can sit down and have a good conversation with and enjoy it. Right.
Yeah.
But equally, I think, there are people that still appreciate somebody that puts in the work, somebody that cares about quality, somebody that goes that extra mile, right? Because, in most cases, they're also hardworking, work ethic, guys. I was just raised in a way where what I do for work and how hard I work is a personal reflection on my character. Like if I go home after a day of half-assing it, I feel like shit. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like I cheated the day. I cheated my employees. I cheated whoever it is. I cheated everybody that day because I didn't kill myself at work and give it 110%.
I think that's that government background, the positive side of doing the military thing. They do the AARs, and every day on the drive home, you get to evaluate how you did today. And a lot of times that answer won't be a positive answer, but just thinking about how you did today separates you from the majority of the population and means that you're somebody who is striving, to do the better thing if you can. Yeah.
Well, it's evident in your products and just in talking to you guys that, you care about what you're doing. And, it's kind of your personal reputation and mark on these products when they go out the door. Like honestly, I'm still reeling in the fact of, a suppressor with 50,000 rounds through it and only dropping 2 dB. It's...
Yeah, pretty remarkable. I was pretty impressed by that as well.
Well, and the fact that, you guys never even thought to test that or market that. You just...
Yeah, I mean, when we usually do our product testing for development, it's mostly stress testing for burst strength, sound testing.
Yeah, you're doing brief sprint stuff, maybe a couple of cycles of brief sprint stuff.
Yeah.
Because obviously...
He's talking about like belt fed full auto stuff.
That higher round count testing, like 50,000, is more stuff that you expect on like a government level where the budget is paid for by somebody else, within a company.
Well, and that's in the RFP that,
Right.
that's what its duty cycle needs to be.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But, to your point, that a consumer, buying a suppressor, that's a lifetime purchase.
It is.
And whether or not it's about the money or the amount of money, it's a lifetime purchase. They're going to own it forever. And the fact that they can confidently buy that suppressor, that, this was more of a commercial application, that I guarantee there's very, very, very few consumers I know that in their life will put 50,000 rounds through all the guns they own in their entire lifetime, much less one platform.
I absolutely agree with that.
So, having them be able to invest in a product that, is going to take care of their needs for the rest of their life, given it's a lifetime product, is, wildly impressive.
Well, thank you. We also have the ability to have a couple of historical items, and we have a Maxim 1920 suppressor, and it shows you that good companies are always going to exist in any marketplace, and that Maxim suppressor is a functional product today.
Right.
That's 100 years. It obviously received lighter use because it's not stainless steel. So if it had heavy use, it would have probably corroded through by now.
Yeah.
But to use something that's 102 years old and understand it's a functional product today is that's kind of the mark. That's what you'd like to do for that majority customer that you're talking about, the guy that shoots a normal amount of ammunition throughout his life.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there's always going to be those special mission unit people who can put that 50,000 rounds to the item in 1 year.
Absolutely.
but for them,
but even
for them, they'd appreciate the product that lasts a year.
1,000%, 100. Yeah, absolutely. Well, what's next for you guys?
The biggest project that we've been working on really is an expansion. We're building an expansion next year that should be completed by the end of the year. So that's exciting. An expansion to our building.
Yeah.
So that we have better amenities for people that work here. People have helped us grow the business, our older employees. So that's really nice. Business wise, I mean,
we actually have a rimfire product, coming, and that's, that harkens back to the original product. And I'm kind of proud of it. I think that, it does things that don't exist in the marketplace. And so, it's kind of a product that really struck something, really nicely.
Yeah. We got some AR-15 developments that we're going to be coming out with, in terms of product. Business wise, though, we're pretty smooth, which is nice. It's taken a while to get smooth, but
yeah,
I don't want to jinx it.
Wow.
Yeah, right. So,
slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So,
Right.
So that's a good mantra to operate by.
Mm.
That's fantastic. Well, I can't thank you guys enough for sharing time with us and sharing your story with us. We're big fans of the product and what you guys are doing. I certainly encourage everybody to come out and check you guys out. And also, I mean, in the majority of our nation, they are free enough states that, there will be a waiting period. There will be some extra dollars that need to get thrown down, but, suppressors are accessible to the general public. Unfortunately, I don't live in one of those free states. But, I encourage our audience to check this out. This isn't, just for special ops, run a nighttime, missions while people sleep. This has a broad application that I think is incredibly valuable. Not to mention, I can just tell you, anybody that once anybody shoots with a suppressor and sees how it manages recoil, how it smooths out the gun, how it quiets, and like, you get so spoiled, you never want to shoot without a suppressor again.
Right.
So I encourage everybody to reach out, check you guys out, and experience, the quality of your product.
Thanks a lot.
thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you again for your time.
Yep. Take care.